Hi everyone, it's so nice to be here with you today. It's such a beautiful day, and kudos to anyone sitting outside, but a special mention to anyone who's watching us live out in the garden. Perfect spot for it. I thought we'd start with some introductions, so let's start down the end with Jaanus.
Yes, hello from my side as well. I'm Jaanus. I'm the Deputy Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources in the Ministry of Climate of Estonia. So very long title. It just means that I'm a government official whose main fields are energy related and critical minerals and other mineral resources and ambient air.
Hello, and hello everyone. My name is Arnaud Castagnier. As you can notice from my French accent, I'm not from here. But I'm working for Skeleton Technologies. I've been working there for 5 years now. I'm the VP in charge of government affairs and strategic partnerships. And Skeleton, in very few words, is a high-power energy storage company from Estonia, developing supercapacitors and high-power batteries.
Fantastic. Gary.
Yeah. And yeah, very nice to meet you from my side, and hello everybody. I'm Gary Erb, and the CEO and founder of UpCatalyst. And in UpCatalyst, we turn CO2 emissions to solid carbon materials, and as raw materials for batteries. So really like a main raw materials for batteries.
Exciting stuff. Alrighty, just a few questions to dig in. Arnaud, a question for you first. So when we talk about battery materials, where are they sourced at the moment? What's the practice?
Yes. You mean for Skeleton or in general?
In general, and maybe Skeleton as well.
Yes. So in general, right now, first of all, most of the batteries right now that are sold in Europe are actually bought from Asia, mostly from Asian suppliers and from Chinese suppliers in particular. So companies like CATL are really the giant there. Many of the battery factories in Europe are actually also producing batteries from these Asian companies. So there are not many European battery players on the market right now. And when there are European battery players, in many cases, they actually produce lithium-ion batteries that actually need some of the critical materials that are mined or sourced from elsewhere, very often processed from China, because most of the batteries produced in Europe right now are using nickel, cobalt, or manganese, where Europe has strong dependencies. On our side at Skeleton, we have one specificity is that we have developed our own patented raw material, which we call curved graphene, which we produce and process in Germany, in Bielefeld-Wolfen, Saxony-Anhalt, which allow our supercapacitors, well, first, not to use any other critical material like cobalt or nickel, so we have a fully European value chain. And for our super battery, which is a higher power battery, it lowers the need for lithium of 40% compared to other high power batteries on the market. But right now, the current state of the European battery market is a strong dependency on Asian batteries and really strong dependency on critical materials mined and processed mostly from China.
Yeah, that's quite a trip for the materials to travel as well when you think about it from that kind of road miles perspective. Question for you, Gary. When we talk about battery materials and making things from raw materials, and you may want to just dig in a little bit more with what you're working on firstly, what are the challenges in getting this up to speed in terms of legislation and sort of practices within the industry in Europe?
Yeah, there are many. So first of all, let's say, as also Arnaud mentioned, that actually the batteries are coming from Asia. So also the raw materials are coming from Asia. And but let's say coming to your question, then in the regulation side, for example, what UpCatalyst does, we take the CO2 emission gas. So basically, we can take it from the biogas. We can take it from different chemical industries. From different sources, there is like a pure CO2 available that we can really transform to the solid carbon as a raw material for batteries. But there currently in European regulation side, there is no like allowances or incentives that actually regulate this kind of turning the CO2 to solid carbon. There are incentives that really like CO2 storage. The CO2 storage is seen right now as that pumping the CO2, gaseous CO2 into the old oil reservoirs. So they got some kind of incentives there. Then concrete companies, they got also some subsidies if the CO2 is inserted into the concrete as a gaseous form. But today, let's say these regulatories, what we see is that they don't know even this kind of possibility that CO2 is really possible to turn it to carbon and oxygen, and out of this carbon is possible to make some raw materials that are really viable for European market. That we don't need to import these from China and being dependent from Asian market.
Janis, maybe you can provide some perspective from the regulatory side, what you're seeing in terms of maybe timing and what it takes to get companies' novel materials up to speed.
Yes, I mean, this field is obviously very complex. So we have these overall European Union goals to become climate neutral by 2050 the latest. We have these interim goals that are closing in the gap. So right now Europe is discussing 2040 targets that could be up to 90%. So that means that the regulatory winds are on your side. However, being a government official, I don't recommend wishing for more regulation. It's usually not a good idea to get more regulation. Regarding how would new novel approaches fit into the picture. So there is currently no viable pathway with existing technologies to get to carbon neutral economy. So every graph that we've seen, and we in Estonia, we recently took a really deep look into it because we just published our climate legislation, the Climate Resilient Economy Act. And basically what we said is that without new technologies, which we don't see yet commercially, there's no way to get to climate neutrality. So this is where solutions like yours come in. So if you can take the carbon out of the air and do something useful with it, that's very good. Now, how to fund it depends on the depth of the budget. So European Union side, there is Innovation Fund, which could work in your favor. I'm pretty sure it's very tough to get in, so lots of papers to fill in. Luckily, we have ChatGPT now, so they say that it helps you fill in all these European documents, so that could help you. And from local government side or national government side, probably the bigger ones go in with the subsidies earlier, and the smaller ones like Estonia come in later, having seen what technologies are viable.
Interesting. And when we talk legislation, I mean, does there need to be something in place to ensure that Europe can compete with the cheaper manufacturers in China and other places?
Yes, so it's a delicate game. So on the one hand, you want to favor your own producers. On the other hand, you also have companies exporting to other countries. So if you put tariffs on one side, then they will respond. So I guess that's something the EU is considering. But concretely, the EU is introducing CBAM, so cross-border carbon adjustment mechanism for steel, for aluminium, so basic products. So that means that the embedded CO2 will be taken into account on these products. No talk yet on whether it goes into more complicated fields, but this is a good start. But then another regulatory framework that's coming in is an alphabet soup that's mixed up with CSDDD and CSRD. So corporate social responsibility must be on the rise. They must report on it. And now in the future, large companies need to start doing due diligence on climate and social and governance matters. So that means that you really have to take into account the climate footprint of the products that you're importing, but also the labor conditions, etc. So that means that large companies will inevitably need to start looking for solutions in the European Union where it can be more easily checked whether all the laws are followed.
And a question for Arnaud and Gary regarding I'm thinking of automotive OEMs. I mean, they're under a lot of pressure to meet climate targets, but they're also under pressure from buyers of their automotive cars and industrial applications. I mean, how do you get them, how do you sell to them? How do you get them to sort of balance the difference between price and sustainability?
Yeah, that's the difficult part right now because, let's say, European battery manufacturers, they are like still like depending on they are still buying all the raw materials from China. They are also buying the batteries from China, also the battery raw materials. If they're going to produce the batteries in Europe, they're buying from Asian countries. And until, that's, let's say, what I can say is 90% of the graphite is produced in China, and graphite is the main raw material for batteries. 30% of the battery composition is graphite. And currently there is no like a supply security from those battery manufacturers. They don't have supply security, because if one day China just, let's say, cuts the export, they will be in deep trouble. And but currently it's really hard to for us. The Chinese materials are very cheap, so the graphite that's produced there is really cheap. And then currently, just to produce it in Europe, it's just more expensive. But yeah, from different new technologies. So we don't have graphite sources in the ground. So we have to produce the graphite differently. And in Upcathlus we have really great solution for that. But what I'm really trying to say is that the European Commission and the regulatories, they should limit the import of raw materials from China, and that will, let's say, boost up the further developments of green technologies inside Europe. This will bring also more investments into new technologies, and this way we can also make a lot of raw materials locally. And don't think that actually all raw materials comes from from the soil, from the mining. Electrochemical is possible to produce most of the raw materials that are needed for green technology, and the only need for this is electricity.
Fantastic. Just a quick, I'll just jump in before I forget. QR code, if you would like to ask questions, you're very welcome. You can do it through the code, which I'm no doubt will come back. There it is. And we will answer those the best we can. Apologies.
Yeah, just to continue on the 2 points that were mentioned, I think, I mean, to be clear, and despite the high innovativeness, I mean, both our companies, both Skeleton and Upcathlus, are extremely innovative, but to be honest, the current picture of European industry and dependencies on raw materials, on clean technologies is quite grim. And I'm saying with a smile so that it looks better, but actually it's extremely, it's pretty bad. And when you look at industries like the solar industry or the wind power industry, actually most of the European players right now are just getting wiped out by Chinese players. And regarding some of the schemes that have been mentioned, I'm sorry, but to be fair, they're not really working. Especially when we compare them with the Inflation Reduction Act, which plans for more than 600 billion dollars of direct subsidies to reshore clean technologies manufacturing in the US. And when you look at the Chinese market, which is totally closed for European players, we have the Critical Raw Materials Act, which basically set up some goals in terms of getting those critical materials. But it's about setting up some trade agreements with the regions where we have these raw materials. It's not about developing alternatives to these critical materials. So there's no new money dedicated to supporting these alternatives that will lower the needs for the critical materials. Regarding the Innovation Fund, I mean, the Innovation Fund is actually made only to support mature technologies. So it doesn't benefit innovative companies that are launching a totally new product. And when you look at the recent call for large-scale projects, last year supported by the Innovation Fund, 100% of the projects supported on the call for large-scale projects were actually big corporations, not scale-ups, and not SMEs.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at the medium-sized, the call for medium-sized projects, 80% supported large corporations. So there's a massive industrial gap in Europe right now where it's doable to attract investment when you are early-stage startups or when you're a big corporation, but there's nothing to solve the scale-up gap that is right now preventing a lot of European scale-up to actually become the next leaders of tomorrow. So there's really a lack of priorities on the European side and a lack of resources, because we need to be aware that on both sides, China and the US, they're not competing on they're not doing free markets. Let's just stop. We should not be. You know, it's like Europe is a little bit the Backstreet Boys when it's about the free trade. I mean, it was great in the 90s, but nowadays it's not happening anymore. China is heavily subsidizing and protecting its economy and markets, and I don't think any other company could be very successful doing manufacturing or development now in Estonia and export to China. I don't think we would be able to compete on a similar basis as the Chinese want. But the US as well is becoming extremely protectionist. And when you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, then if you want to benefit from subsidies for battery production, it's not only about the manufacturing of the batteries and the cells. It's also about where the critical materials are coming from. So there will be also reshoring of a lot of processing of critical materials from outside of the US to the US. Europe is a little bit in the middle, not knowing if we should support innovation, if we should build more partnerships abroad, if we should attract foreign investment. I mean, you see, right now, the second biggest battery producer in Europe, in terms of countries, is Hungary, because they're building massive gigafactories for CATL and other Chinese battery companies, and they are bringing them to Hungary, which means also that they will become a European manufactured batteries as well. So that's why initiatives like the battery passport can be very important, because it's about evaluating the entire value chain.
Let me ask you a question about the battery passports. I mean, are they enough? Do they go far enough? I mean, the timelines are pretty generous in terms of rollout and the different things that can be measured at different times and the accountability. But do you see them more as a carrot or a stick? Like, how much credence as an industry do you hold to it in practice?
Yeah, I don't know how you see it. It's really what I see from the battery passport. This is really like let's say it's a positive thing for us. So as we are providing like a carbon like a negative raw material, then of course this has influence in the let's say battery manufacturers can really benefit from our raw material and calculating their battery passport. So definitely it's there. But let's say what I still like, let's say, is feel is that Europe is really like a very slow in this kind of activities. While like you really let's say, totally agree with Arnaud that there is like a huge like a Chinese government is like a highly supporting their like a green technologies, battery like developments over there. The same is like happening in US as well. So with the IRA, where they're like let's say more than $1 trillion like dollars is like given for subsidies, and you don't have to write actually these kind of like applications. So these companies actually who are doing this kind of like let's say green technologies, they got like automatically these kind of subsidies. In Europe, for example, like, talking about this innovation fund. Last year, Up Catalyst, we applied to it. We didn't get it. We listed like all companies actually who received it. There were really like large-scale companies. So this year we are not going to apply it. So it's like a pointless waste of money. And even writing this kind of, just giving you examples, just this innovation fund was like you can apply for like a €7 million like a €7 million like a funding from there, grant from there. But basically, you have to write like a 500-page document. It took like 3 months for all our team to write it like that. So crazy. It's like, let's say, and then later on, let's say you have spent all your, like 7 people, you have been working on that, 3 months, like writing this kind of 500-page documents, and zero, nothing. So that's like,
telling it like it is. Yeah, absolutely. Janis, do you have any involvement with those? Can you automate the process or make it a bit more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, the bureaucracy is overwhelming. Also for the government. So we are currently, my team is working on getting state aid permit for offshore wind subsidy, and I mean, like, we are also doing that, filling in the papers. We're not up to 500 pages yet, but I'm pretty sure we will be. So I mean, that's how Europe is. It's the cost of doing business here. The US is okay with printing more money and going into trillions and trillions of debt. Okay, Europe is not going for that, so that's the road we've taken. I'm positive though that Europe is looking towards how to mitigate these rules, but I've never seen a successful reduce bureaucracy act by European Union. So let's see. Maybe this time it will be better. Another way to think about it is that if the potential reward is big enough, then if you compare the work or resources, money you put in versus the reward, then you see whether it is, plus the chance of whether you get the money or not, then you see whether it's worth your while or not. So going after big money, it does take some time and resources. Whether 7 million is big enough, that's another question.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been the most interesting discussion, and honestly, we probably could have spoken for another 20 minutes. I know we've only been able to scratch the surface with some of this stuff, but I really appreciate the honesty in this session, because a lot of companies want to give you the gloss, and I think you've told us the reality of what it's like working in this sector in Europe. So thank you very much for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you. And please visit our reactor outside in the courtyard, where we can really show that how the CO2 is turned into solid carbon. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.